My name is Andrea Brooks, and I'm 34 years old. One Sunday this past June, at family dinner, my mom stood up, tapped her water glass, and announced that my brother and his two kids were moving into my house, and not one person at that table thought to ask me. I said nothing. I passed the green beans. But 2 days before that dinner, I had sat in a title office across town and signed my name until my hand cramped. The house was already sold. My family had no idea. The moving truck they rented, the boxes they packed, the keys my mother copied without asking, all of it was headed for a front door that no longer belonged to me. And the truck was only the beginning. What my family did after they found out, and what happened at my mother's kitchen table 3 days later, is the part I still turn over at night. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where quiet people finally get loud. In their own way. We tell stories about family, boundaries, and the moments that change everything. If you've ever been the one who keeps the peace while everyone else keeps taking, this one is for you. Drop a comment below, and be sure to subscribe. The house was a 1952 bungalow at 14 Maple Street, and before it became a battleground, it was just mine. I bought it in 2019, when I was 27, for $168,000. Every cent of the down payment came from tax seasons I worked while my college roommates went on spring break. I'm a CPA. I do other people's math for a living, and I know exactly what things cost. That house cost me 7 years of Saturdays. I refinished the oak floors on my knees with a rented sander. I planted a row of peonies along the front walk that first spring, the fat pink kind my grandmother used to grow. When the porch step cracked, I watched a video, borrowed a drill, and fixed it myself. Nobody helped me move in. Nobody really came to see it afterward either. In 7 years, my family never once ate a meal under my roof. That was the unwritten rule in the Brooks family. Andrea comes to us. Sunday dinner happened at my parents' place in Kettering, 15 minutes away, every single week. If I had hosted a holiday, it would have meant admitting my life counted as a destination. My mother had been inside my house exactly 4 times in 7 years. Remember that number, because it matters later. 4 visits, and she still felt entitled to hand out my rooms like dinner rolls. But I'm getting ahead of myself. In May, the house was quiet. The peonies were budding, and I was humming while I packed boxes into the back of my closet. I had a secret. A good one. The first real secret I had ever kept from my family, and it fit in a folder on my desk. I was leaving. Here is what nobody in Kettering knew. In April, my firm asked me to lead the new office they were opening in Salina, up by Grand Lake, 50 minutes north. Office led. My name on the door, my own team, a salary bump I had earned through 11 tax seasons. I said yes before the managing partner finished his sentence. Then I did what I always do. I made a plan with numbers in it. My friend Dana has sold real estate in Dayton for a decade, and she knew a young couple, the Hendersons, who were renting in my school district and tired of losing bidding wars. No sign in the yard, no listing photos of my bedroom on the internet. One walkthrough on a Tuesday while the neighbors were at work. One inspection, one clean offer of $265,000. We closed on a Friday, the 5th of June, in a title office with bad coffee and wonderful silence. The Hendersons did something kind too. They didn't need the house until midsummer, so we signed a 30-day rent-back agreement. In plain English, I paid them rent to keep living in my own house for 1 more month while I wrapped things up at work. For 30 days, I was a tenant in my own life, and honestly, I didn't mind. I had already put a deposit on a little blue cottage 12 minutes from the new office, close enough to the lake to hear geese argue in the morning. I practiced how I would tell my family at Sunday dinner. Something simple. I got a promotion. I sold the house. I'm moving in July. I rehearsed it in the shower, in the car, in line at the pharmacy. I never got the chance to say a word of it. To be fair to my own silence, you need to know what my job in this family had always been. Not daughter, not sister. Staff. I have done my parents' taxes since I was 19. When their roof failed in 2021, the check for $4,000 came from my savings, and my mother said, "You're a blessing," and never mentioned it again. When my brother Caleb's marriage ended last fall, I was the one who sat at his kitchen table sorting the paperwork he refused to open, while he watched highlights on his phone. Caleb is 38. He got laid off from the distribution warehouse 8 months ago, and in March he moved back into my parents' spare room. His kids stayed with their mom Tessa during the week and landed on my parents' pull-out couch every other weekend. Ellie is 8, Sam is 5. I love those two the way you love kids you didn't have to raise, completely, and with snacks. In my family, there were two kinds of children, the ones who needed and the one who handled it. Guess which one I was? 5 years ago, I gave my mother a spare key to Maple Street for emergencies, back when I believed we meant the same thing by that word. She kept it in the junk drawer by her stove, on a ring with a paper tag. I want to be honest with you. I knew the shape of my family long before that dinner. That is exactly why I built my exit quietly, with a realtor and a title company, instead of announcing my plans and giving anyone a season to talk me out of them. The paperwork was my seatbelt, and I had clicked it before anyone saw the curve coming. The first Sunday of June looked like every Sunday of my life. My parents' dining room in Kettering, the good tablecloth, pot roast, the smell of rolls just this side of burnt. My chair was the one nearest to the kitchen, because somebody has to jump up when the gravy needs refilling, and in our house that somebody has had my name on it since I was 10 years old. Caleb got served first. Nobody ever decided that out loud. The platter just always started its orbit at his elbow, the way rivers always run downhill. Sam was telling a story about a frog at day camp that had no ending and 3 beginnings. Ellie sat beside me drawing horses on a napkin, and my dad, Roy, said maybe 6 sentences the whole meal, which for him was chatty. I remember feeling almost tender about all of it. This was the last ordinary dinner, and I was the only one who knew. Tomorrow or the next day, I would drive over, sit my parents down with coffee, and tell them about the promotion, the sale, the cottage. Gently, on my terms. I was still arranging the words in my head when my mother, Linda, stood up at the head of the table and tapped her water glass with a spoon, twice, the way she does at anniversaries and funerals. She had her church voice on. My mother is 63, and she can make a room fall quiet faster than a dropped plate. "Your father and I have wonderful news," she said, and she smiled straight at Caleb, and something in my stomach went cold and started counting. Wonderful news in my mother's dialect has never once required my opinion. Ellie put down her crayon. Even the frog story stopped, and then my mother said my name. "We've decided," my mother said, "that Caleb and the children will move into Andrea's house on July 11th. She said it the way you announce a graduation. There was even a little flourish of her hand, like a game show model presenting a refrigerator. "It's perfect," she went on. "Andrea rattles around in 3 bedrooms all by herself. Ellie will take the front room, the one with the flowers under the window. Sam can have the little room, and Caleb will take the master, since Andrea hardly needs all that closet." She had assigned my closet. She had walked through my house 4 times in 7 years and had still mapped it, room by room, onto her son. I waited for someone to look at me. My father studied his pot roast like it owed him money. Aunt Carol, who was there because she is always there, said what a blessing, and asked if the kids would change schools. My mother said it was all being handled, that family looks after family, and then she delivered the line she had clearly polished in the car. "Family fills empty rooms," she said, warm as a quilt, and everyone around that table nodded, because it sounds like scripture when she says it. Empty rooms. 7 years of my Saturdays, my floors, my peonies, my mortgage, an empty space on her map, waiting for a real family to give it a purpose. Caleb finally looked up from his plate and gave me the grin that has been getting him out of consequences since 1994. "It'd really help, sis," he said. That was the ask. That was the entire ask. I opened my mouth, and 34 years of training closed it for me. I passed the green beans to my left, and I heard it, clear as anything, under the clink of serving spoons, the sound of a pen on paper in a title office, 2 days old, saying what I couldn't. Nobody at that table knew the house was already gone. I decided, in that dining room, that for now I would keep it that way. I know what you're thinking, because I have thought it 1,000 times since. Why didn't I stand up right there and say the house is sold? 3 reasons, and I want to lay them out honestly, like a ledger. First, reflex. When your role in a family is to absorb, your throat learns rules your brain never agreed to. My silence at that table wasn't a plan yet, it was muscle memory with a 34-year warranty. Second, and this one I will defend to my grave, strategy. You don't announce a fire drill to people who are already holding matches. If I had said sold at that table, my mother would not have heard a fact. She would have heard a problem with 5 weeks left to solve it. There would have been family meetings. There would have been Aunt Carol on my porch with a casserole and a petition. There would have been Ellie, coached and blinking, asking why Aunt Andrea didn't want them. My mother is a general, and I had seen her campaigns before. My closing was done, but my moving wasn't, and I did not intend to spend my last month at Maple Street under siege. Third, the reason that shames me a little, I still believed in a soft landing. I decided I would go to my parents quietly, that week, just the 3 of us, and tell them the truth before it ever reached a moving truck. Let my mother absorb it in private where there was no audience to perform for. I gave myself 1 week to do it kindly. As it turned out, my mother gave me 3 days. She has always been faster than me. On Wednesday, my phone rang, and the campaign had already started without me. My mother does not call to ask. She calls to coordinate. Wednesday evening, I picked up and she was already mid-sentence, the way a train is already moving when you step on. July 11th is confirmed, she said. Your Aunt Carol's renting the box truck. She gets a discount through the church. We'll start with the kids' furniture. Caleb thinks the sectional won't fit down your hallway, so you'll want to move your reading chair to the basement. You don't use that room anyway. I stood in my kitchen, listening to my own furniture being redistricted. Mom, I said, we need to talk about the house. I actually got that far. She rolled right over me, gentle as a steamroller draped in a tablecloth. Oh, honey, don't worry about cleaning, she said. Pastor Jim's wife already heard the news and thinks it's just beautiful, what you're doing for your brother. Everyone's so proud. I closed my eyes. She had already told the church. Do you understand what that means in a town like ours? It means the story had been published. Andrea opens her home. Edition 1, sold out. No corrections printed. Anything I said now would not be information. It would be betrayal. Mom, I tried again. And Thursday? Can I come by Thursday? Just you and Dad? Of course, she said. Bring the good tape. We'll want it for boxes. And then, right before she hung up, in the voice she uses to tuck the whole world in. It's settled, honey. Click. I stood there holding the phone for a long moment. Then I got out a pencil, and on the calendar by my fridge, I stopped writing plans for how to tell them. I started counting the days I had left, like a woman marking a wall. Thursday never happened, by the way. My mother rescheduled me for a church rummage sale which tells you where I ranked, so the next contact came Saturday, from Caleb. A text. Gonna swing by and look at rooms. What time works? I wrote back that I was at the office, which was true, because tax extensions wait for no family crisis. When I pulled into my driveway at 4, his truck was already at the curb, and my brother was sitting on my porch swing like a man waiting on a table he'd reserved. Relax, he said. I just peeked in the windows. He said it the way you'd say I watered your plants. Then he walked me around my own yard, pointing. He was thinking Ellie would love the front bedroom. Morning light. She could see the flowers. He'd probably put his weight bench in the garage. The peonies might have to go if he ever got a trampoline, but that was down the road. Down the road. My brother had a road now, and it ran through my deed. Here's the thing I need you to understand about Caleb. He wasn't gloating. There was no smirk in any of it. He talked about my house the way you talk about weather that's been promised to improve. No guilt, no gratitude, just forecast. Our mother had said the rooms were his, so in his mind, they simply were. It would almost be restful, being Caleb. I told him I had plans and needed to head back out, which was a lie I enjoyed. He drove off waving. I sat on the porch step until the streetlights came on, thinking about currents. A current isn't cruel. That's the thing about a current. It doesn't hate the thing it carries away. It just never once asks. The next day, I skipped Sunday dinner in Kettering for the first time in years. I had a better appointment. Once a month, I pick Ellie and Sam up from Tessa's. We get ice cream at the place with the crooked cow sign, and I hear everything. School politics, frog updates, which cartoon betrayed them. That afternoon, Sam was wearing a cape for reasons he declined to explain, and Ellie slid into the booth with her sketchbook hugged to her chest. She'd made me something. She turned it around, shy and proud. A house with a triangle roof, a row of pink blobs along the front walk. 2 stick kids in the yard, 1 tall stick lady with brown hair, and across the top, in careful second-grade letters, Aunt Andrea's house. Grandma says we get to live there, Sam announced through sprinkles. Are you gonna still be there? Do I get the flower room? Ellie asked, quieter, watching my face the way 8-year-olds do when they've learned that adult answers wobble. So the children had been told. Of course they had. The story had gone out to the whole congregation. Why would the 2 people with the most to lose be spared? I want to tell you, I handled it gracefully. What I actually did was buy a second round of sprinkles and say, "That house is full of surprises," which was the truest sentence available. I could not tell an 8-year-old the truth before I told her grandmother, and her grandmother had me rescheduled behind a rummage sale. But I folded that drawing very carefully, and I put it in my purse, and it stayed there through everything that came after, like a splinter I refused to have removed. 2 kids had been promised my life. Somebody was going to have to break a promise to children. My mother had made sure it would look like me. The following Thursday, I finally got my audience. I drove to Kettering after work with a folder in my bag. Not the deed. Nothing dramatic. Just a printed 1-page summary of what I planned to say, because I organized my courage in bullet points. My parents were at the kitchen table with decaf. I sat down and started where I'd rehearsed. Mom, Dad, before anything else happens with July, there's something you need to know about the house. It isn't going to work the way you've planned. I got exactly that far. My mother's hand came up like a crossing guard's. Andrea Marie, she said, please don't do this. Do what? I asked. Make it hard, she said. And then came the flood, soft and warm and absolutely load-bearing. After everything this family has done for you. Your brother is drowning. Those babies need a yard. You have so much, sweetheart, and it costs you nothing to share it. She reached across the table and squeezed my wrist on the word, nothing. My father pushed back his chair, murmured something about checking the water heater, and evaporated into the garage, which is where Brooks' men have gone during weather for 60 years. I looked at my mother's hand on my wrist. I thought, tell her now. Say it plain. The house is sold. I closed on it in June. I move out in 3 weeks. And I watched her eyes and I understood something with accountant's clarity. She wasn't in a conversation. She was in a ceremony. Facts were not going to be received here tonight. They would only be witnessed, filed as a tax, and redistributed to the family as evidence. I put my folder back in my bag unopened. Fine, Mom, I said. I have to go. It was not fine. I was not done. But the next thing I did without an audience. The week after that, the campaign went door to door, except every door was mine. Monday, a text from Aunt Carol. Trucks reserved. So proud of you, honey. Tuesday, at the pharmacy, Pastor Jim's wife caught my elbow by the vitamins and told me I was a blessing, that not many young women would do this, that my mother glowed when she talked about it. Wednesday, Caleb sent me a photo of bunk beds on clearance with 3 thumbs-up emojis, as if we were furnishing our clubhouse. Thursday, my mother called about nothing. A recipe, ostensibly, and found a way to say it again before goodbye. Empty rooms are a sin, honey, when families sleeping on couches. There it was again. Her scripture. My house had been rezoned into a moral emergency, and every kind voice in my life had been issued a shovel. That is how it works, by the way. Nobody ever pulls you apart with cruelty in a family like mine. They bury you in warmth, one spoonful of praise at a time, until the whole is exactly your shape and everyone agrees you climbed in yourself. I kept my voice pleasant all week and my sentences short. And every evening I went home, took the pencil off the calendar, and crossed off a square. 13 days left on my rent back. I marked them like a prisoner with better handwriting. I'd stopped feeling guilty somewhere around the pharmacy. What I felt now was quieter and more useful. I felt organized. The cottage sale had closed fast. Equity money moves quickly when nobody is asking to borrow it. And boxes went north 2 carloads a week. My files first, then the good pans. If my family had bothered to visit, even once, they'd have noticed my bookshelves going bare. 4 visits in 7 years. I told you that number would matter. Tessa asked me to coffee the last week of June. My brother's ex-wife is a nurse, which means she is professionally difficult to fool, and she had been my friend before she was ever his wife. She got straight to it. The kids keep talking about the big move, she said, and Linda already gave me these. She slid a school transfer packet across the table, forms for Ellie, half filled out in my mother's excellent penmanship. Address line, 14 Maple Street. My address. Printed in ink, by a woman who had never once asked me a question with a blank in it. They hadn't been submitted yet. Tessa had to sign, and Tessa signs nothing she hasn't read twice, God bless her. I just want them stable, she said, watching me. Is this house thing actually happening? And sitting in that coffee shop, I did something I hadn't done in 34 years of managing my family. I told the truth ahead of schedule. No, I said. It's not happening. The house is sold. I closed weeks ago. I moved north on the 2nd. I braced for shock. Tessa leaned back, looked at the ceiling and laughed once, the way tired people laugh. Good, she said. Good for you. Then, quieter. Why do you think I left, Andrea? It was never him I divorced. It was the whole weather system. We sat with that a minute, 2 graduates of the same storm. She promised to keep it quiet, and I believed her, because Tessa had spent 6 years learning what my mother does with information. Driving home, I realized my hands were steady on the wheel. Someone knew, and the sky had not fallen. It was the first time the truth had been out of my body, and it fit fine. 11 days. Sam turned 5 at the end of June, and the party was at my parents' place, streamers and a dinosaur cake, and 24 people from church on folding chairs. I was at the dessert table cutting slices, because of course I was, when my mother clinked her glass again. Twice. That sound had started to work on me like a smoke alarm. Before the cake goes around, she said, one more little present. And this one's for Daddy. She was beaming at Caleb. From her apron pocket she produced a set of keys, bright new brass, freshly cut, tied with a red ribbon bow. I had copies made from my spare, she announced to the room. So July 11th, you just drive right up and walk right in. To your new home. The folding chairs applauded. Somebody whistled. Caleb held the keys up and jingled them like a tambourine, and Sam grabbed for them, and Ellie, standing beside me at the cake table, looked up and asked, Are those the keys to your house, Aunt Andrea? I looked down at that little face and then out at the room. The clapping, the ribbon. My mother flushed with generosity, handing out copies of my front door as party favors. The key I had given her 5 years ago for emergencies. It turns out I had never understood the word. In my mother's dictionary, an emergency is when the family needs what you have. The lock itself was only ever a formality. I kept cutting cake. Even slices, steady hands. But something in me finished a long calculation right there, and the total came out clean and cold. They're Grandma's copies, sweetheart, I told Ellie, which was, in every way, the truth. Here is what I could not stop looking at. The rest of that party. A red ribbon bow bouncing on my brother's belt loop, on a ring of shiny keys. Keys my mother had made. Keys everyone in that room believed in. Keys to a door that, in 2 weeks, would not exist for any of us. My mother had handed her son a house. What she'd actually handed him was a souvenir. The last week of June, I came home early on a Tuesday and knew before I was 3 steps inside. The back door was unlocked, and I do not leave doors unlocked. I am a woman who lives alone and does other people's audits. My kitchen chairs were out of place, dragged and half pushed back. There was a tape measure on the windowsill, the wide yellow kind, not mine. 2 sets of shoe prints on the floor I'd mopped Sunday, one large, one small. My phone buzzed while I was still standing in it. Caleb. Hey, we measured the kids' rooms real quick. Or backdoor sticks, lol. He had used the party keys. Of course he had. Legally, for a few more days, that was my home to occupy under assigned rent back, and my brother had walked 2 strangers' worth of footprints through it to plan his furniture. There's a particular cold that comes over you when your own kitchen has been rearranged by people who never knocked, and I stood in it for a while, and then I did what I do. I made a list. That night, the things that mattered went into my car. Grandmother's quilt, my files, the drawing from my purse pinned safely in a book. 2 more carloads went north that week. If you've ever come home to find your own chairs moved by someone who never asked, you know that exact cold. Tell me in the comments what you would have done, because I genuinely want to know. Me, I made a list. Accountants always make a list. And if you're new here, subscribe, because the truck comes in 2 weeks, and you'll want to be sitting down. The last item on my list that night wasn't furniture. It just said, "Tell the Hendersons." I called Dana that same night, and the next evening the Hendersons met me at the coffee place by the title office, the same one where we'd signed. Claire Henderson is maybe 31, a pediatric X-ray tech, and her husband David teaches middle school science and has the calm of a man who supervises volcanoes made of baking soda. I put it to them straight, because they were about to own the fallout of my family, and they deserve the forecast. My relatives believe my brother is moving into your house on July 11th, I said. They have rented a truck. They have keys my mother copied without permission. I've tried to tell them and been talked over. I'll keep trying, but I'd be lying if I promised they'll hear it. To their eternal credit, neither of them panicked. Claire asked exactly 2 questions. Did the copied keys work on the current locks? Yes. And were any of these people dangerous? No, just certain. David wrote something in a little notebook and said they'd already scheduled a locksmith for possession day, July 3rd. First thing, because his dad had taught him you always rekey a house before you sleep in it. Smart dad. I gave them my number and Dana's, and I told them I was sorry, that they'd bought a bungalow and were getting a stage play with it. Claire stirred her coffee and said something I've kept. It's our home now, she said. We'll be kind and we'll be clear. Kind and clear. I drove back to Maple Street thinking about how I'd spent 34 years being kind on behalf of people who mistook it for consent. I hadn't set a trap for my family. I want that on the record. I had simply stopped standing between them and the truth. There's a difference. I spent my last night at Maple Street the way you sit with an old friend in a hospital. July 2nd. The rooms were empty and enormous, the way rooms get when your voice starts echoing in them. I mopped the oak floors I had refinished on my knees. One more time, not because the Hendersons required it, but because you should hand things over better than you got them. I ate dinner standing at the counter, pizza on a paper towel, and let myself do the montage. 27 years old, signing papers I could barely afford. The first night, sleeping on an air mattress in the flower room because the bed frame came Thursday. The winter the furnace quit and I cried. Alone. And then fixed it. Alone. And the crying and the fixing both belonged entirely to me. That's the part my mother never understood about that house. It was never empty. It was full of a whole person, floor to ceiling, and the person was me. Out front, in the dark, I dug up one fat clump of peonies from the end of the row, my grandmother's kind, and potted it for the cottage, patting the hole closed like an apology to the ones staying behind. Then I set my keys on the kitchen counter for Dana to hand to the Hendersons, all of them, the originals, and let the lock click me out of 7 years of my life. You can love a thing and still refuse to let it be taken. Sometimes leaving is how you keep it. I was in the car when my phone buzzed. My mother to the family group chat. All caps and confetti emojis. Moving day, July 11th. 9 a.m. pizza after. I put the phone face down on the passenger seat and drove north. The night of July 10th, at the cottage, I sat on my new porch with my phone in my hand and a message drafted to my mother. It was a good message. Clear, kind, complete. The house is sold. It closed in June. The new owners move in tomorrow morning. Please do not bring the truck. My thumb hovered over send for a long time. Understand what I was holding. My entire life, I have been this family's airbag. Every collision they aimed themselves at, I inflated first. The roof money, the divorce paperwork, the 1,000 quiet phone calls that kept consequences from ever reaching the people who caused them. Sending that text was the airbag deploying one more time, and I ran the projection, because projections are my job. If I sent it, the truck would be canceled, yes. And by Sunday my mother would have a new campaign. The sale money. Family meetings about what Andrea owes Caleb from her windfall. The story would simply change costumes, and I would be back at that table being warm buried alive, with nothing left to protect. If I didn't send it, tomorrow would be ugly, public, and unforgettable. And the one thing my family could never again believe was that things just work out. Because Andrea handles it. I thought about Ellie's drawing in my book. I thought about the red bow on those useless keys. I thought about the phrase "it's settled, honey." Then I deleted the draft, letter by letter, and turned off my porch light. For 34 years I had been the airbag. That night, for the first time, I let the car hit the wall. At 8:40 the next morning, my phone rang. It was Ellie's small voice, wobbling. "Aunt Andrea? Why is there a strange lady in your house?" I was already dressed. I won't pretend otherwise. I had been up since 6, drinking coffee I couldn't taste, because I knew what morning it was. "Sweetheart," I said, "put your daddy on," and I was in the car before Caleb's voice arrived, sullen and confused, saying, "Andrea, what is going on? Some woman won't open your door." 50 minutes, I told him. Don't do anything loud. Then I drove south with my heart going like a woodpecker, and here is what I later stitched together from Tessa, from Claire, and from what I saw myself when I turned onto Maple Street at 9:30. Aunt Carol's rented box truck sat angled across the driveway with its back gate rolled up, a sectional sofa halfway down the ramp like a beached whale, boxes on my old lawn. My mother stood at the front door in her church blouse, knocking with the flat of her hand, calling Andrea's name into a house that did not contain me. Caleb was on the porch step jabbing his shiny brass key at the new deadbolt over and over, the red ribbon still on the ring, a man trying to log into a life with the wrong password. And in the doorway, calm as a school nurse, stood Claire Henderson in her scrubs, saying the sentence she'd been saving for 8 days. "I'm so sorry, but this is our home. We bought this house. We closed a month ago." My mother laughed at her. Actually laughed. The polite, appalled laugh she uses on waitresses who bring the wrong order. "Honey." "No," she said. "This is my daughter's house." Claire, kind and clear, said it again. Slower. "We closed. In June. From Andrea Brooks." And that is the exact moment my tires crunched the curb, and every head on that lawn rotated toward me in one motion, like a field of sunflowers finding the sun. I turned off the engine. I left the folder of settlement papers on the seat. I remember thinking, there is no version of the next hour where I get to stay everyone's favorite quiet daughter. Good, I thought. Good. Crossing that lawn took maybe 10 steps, and 34 years. Tessa's car pulled up behind mine. Caleb had called her in the chaos, and I heard her tell Ellie and Sam, "Ice cream right now," in the tone nurses use for "get behind the lead apron." Bless her forever for that. The kids never saw the worst of it. My mother met me halfway across the grass with her arms wide, palms up, the eternal gesture of "explain this to me." "Andrea, tell this woman," she commanded. "There's been some mistake at the bank." Behind her, neighbors had drifted onto porches with coffee mugs, wearing the neutral faces of people committed to hearing everything. I kept my voice low and level, and I said the truest thing I have ever said on a lawn. There's no mistake, Mom. I sold the house. It closed a month ago. It was never the family's to fill. For 1 second, the yard was so quiet I could hear the truck's ramp ticking in the heat. My mother's face did something I had never seen it do. It searched, flipped through every page in her book for the chapter where this happens, and found nothing. And then it landed on the only sentence she had left, and she said it loudly. For the porches, her voice cracking down the middle. We fill empty rooms, Andrea. That is what family does. There it was. Her scripture played at full volume, and for the first time in my life I heard it for what it had always been. Not a description of love, a zoning ordinance. David Henderson appeared beside his wife, notebook still in his shirt pocket, and said evenly, "Please move the truck off our driveway. We'll help carry anything back up the ramp." Nobody moved. Caleb stood on the porch of a stranger's house, staring down at the ribboned keys in his palm like a man holding a raffle ticket for a canceled raffle. And my father, who had said nothing all morning, stepped close to me as I turned back toward my car and spoke almost too quietly to hear. "Your grandmother had a piano," he said. "That was all. It stopped me cold." The retreat was not graceful. Aunt Carol ground the truck's gears backing off the driveway. Boxes went back up the ramp in silence, carried by David Henderson, who is a genuinely decent man and made 2 trips. My mother did not help. She stood by the peonies, Claire's peonies now, arranging her face for the neighbors, and then she got in Carol's cab without looking at me. Caleb left the ribboned keys on the porch rail. I stayed behind because somebody owed the Hendersons an apology on behalf of my bloodline, and it was going to be me. "I'm so sorry about your Saturday," I told Claire. She shook her head. "You warned us," she said. "You did it right. This was the easy part." And she looked at me steadily when she said the last bit, like she'd met my mother somewhere before in a different costume. I drove north with the windows down. By the time I reached the cottage, my phone showed a stack of missed calls 2 screens deep, and the voicemail icon sat there like a lit fuse. I didn't listen to any of them that night. Only one message mattered, and it arrived at 9, from my mother. No emojis this time, no confetti. "Family meeting, Tuesday, 6 p.m. You owe your brother that much." I set the phone down and looked out at the dark lake for a long time. Oh, there's that word again, I thought. Bring the ledger then. I'm very good with ledgers. Sunday and Monday, the family court convened without me. The way it always does, in a group chat I could watch like weather radar. Aunt Carol. I have never been so embarrassed. The church saw everything. A cousin I hear from at Christmas. So the kids are just homeless now? Nice. Pastor Jim's wife, sliding into my private messages, praying for your family and for your heart, sweetie. The heart emoji did a lot of work. My mother posted once, and only once, to the full chat. Some people get rich selling their family out the back door. Then silence, which from her is artillery. And here's what you should notice, because I finally did. In 2 days of righteous fury, not one person asked where I was going to live, or why I'd sold, or whether I was okay. The audit only ever runs in one direction. Monday night, Tessa called. "Don't you dare fold," she said. "And listen to me. The kids were never homeless. They live with me, Andrea. They have always lived with me. Moving into your place was about Caleb getting the school district and Linda getting her grandkids 7 minutes away. It was never shelter. It was strategy." I sat with that after she hung up, feeling something unclench. The emergency had been a set piece. The drowning man had a boat the whole time. My house was just a nicer one. So Tuesday's meeting wasn't going to be about need, whatever banner it flew. Fine. Monday night, I sat down at my desk, and I did what my people do instead of yelling. I opened 2 accounts, printed some paperwork, and put it in a folder. Accountants don't bring arguments to a fight. We bring documents with signature lines. I got to Kettering early on Tuesday, on purpose, and found my father where Brooks men weather storms. The garage. Under the hood of a mower that didn't need him. I asked about the piano. He wiped his hands for a long time. Then, in more consecutive sentences than I'd heard from him in years, he gave me the missing chapter of my own mother. 1989, he said. Your grandma passed, and there was the house on Fairlawn and the piano. A good upright. Your mother played beautifully, you never knew that, did you? And her brother Gene had just had a son. So your grandpa sat your mother down and explained how it would go. The house to Jean, for the family name. The piano too, since it stays with the house. Her signature on the papers by Friday. He looked at the mower instead of me. She was 26. She signed. She never played again. Never once complained. And somewhere along the line she decided that swallowing it was the same thing as loving them. Her whole life since has been proving that trade was worth it. I stood there among the paint cans doing the terrible arithmetic. My mother wasn't punishing me for having something. She was punishing me for refusing to sign it away. Because if I could say no and the sky held, then the girl at that table in 1989 could have said no too, and hadn't. Nobody hands down a chain like that on purpose. They hand it down because it's the only heirloom they were given. It didn't make what she was about to do to me all right. But it told me what I was actually walking into. The kitchen door opened behind me. Andrea, my mother said, come inside and sit down. My mother's kitchen table has hosted every verdict of my life, and Tuesday it was set for one more. She sat at the head. Caleb sat at her right hand looking like a man attending his own jury duty. My father took the chair by the window at the edge of the frame, per tradition. In the center of the table lay two documents, squared to the wood grain. The first was a sheet of legal pad in my mother's handwriting. A column of figures, underlined twice at the bottom, the way she totals grocery budgets. $60,000. The second was Ellie's school transfer packet, my dead address still printed on it in her perfect ink, positioned so it faced my chair. Set dressing. My mother has never once arranged a table by accident. Sit, honey, she said, warm as ever, as if Saturday had happened to some other family on some other lawn. You got lucky on that house, and luck like that isn't yours. It's the Lord providing for this whole family through you. 60,000 puts your brother in a rental with room for the kids and pays off his truck, and we start fresh. No hard feelings about the little stunt. She slid the legal pad an inch toward me. Caleb studied his hands. The clock over the stove. The same rooster clock that has watched me eat 10,000 meals. Ticked like it was billing by the second. I didn't touch the paper. I asked the only question I had come to ask, and I asked it gently, looking at my brother, then my mother. The kids live with Tessa. They always have. Don't they? The refrigerator hummed. Caleb's ears went red, and my mother's voice, when it finally came, had dropped into its softest register, the one she saves for closing. Andrea, she said, sweet as pie crust. Where those children sleep is a family matter, and you stopped being owed family explanations when you sold your family out from under us. But I'll make this simple. She folded her hands. Sign your brother that check. And Saturday never happened. You'll be at this table for Sunday dinner, and Thanksgiving, and Christmas morning when those babies open their presents. Everything goes back to how it was. Her eyes went, deliberately, to the refrigerator door, where school photos of Ellie and Sam have hung under magnets for years, and then came back to me. Or don't, she said, and you can explain to yourself, in that little house on the lake, why you chose money over ever seeing them again. Grandma decides who comes to Grandma's, honey, and their daddy, she touched Caleb's sleeve, will back me up. Caleb looked at the floor with tremendous concentration. My father, by the window, had gone very still, a man watching a rerun he'd hoped was cancelled. And I sat there, calm on the outside, while the whole machine finally showed me its blueprints. Every family has a currency. Ours had just been printed in front of me. Access to 2 children I loved, exchange rate $60,000, my mother the only teller at the only window. This was the moment the old Andrea would have started calculating what peace costs and reaching for the checkbook, because the old Andrea believed peace was something you could buy for other people if you just kept paying. I looked at the legal pad. I looked at the school photos on the fridge, And for the first time in my life, at that table, I reached into my bag for my own paper instead. I want to slow down here, because from the outside, the next part took 2 minutes, and from the inside, it took my whole life. My hand was in my bag, resting on the folder, and both roads were completely clear to me, the way they say a drowning person sees the shore. Road 1. Sign her paper. $60,000 was real money, but I'd cleared more than twice that on the sale. The math worked fine. The math always worked. That was the trap of Road 1. It was affordable, it was familiar, and I knew its exact taste, because I had been paying that toll my whole adult life. Roof money, divorce paperwork, 1,000 swallowed sentences. Every payment bought me a seat at that table, and the seat never once came with a voice, and some part of me had believed, straight through to that Tuesday, that the next payment would finally be the one that made them see me. Road 2 had no pavement on it at all. Nobody in my family had ever walked it. I looked across the table at my mother, at her folded hands, her steady eyes, and behind her, faint as a watermark, a 26-year-old girl at a different table in 1989, holding a pen over papers about a house and a piano, with her father's voice explaining how family works. My mother wasn't really asking me for $60,000. I understood that at last, fully, the way you finally read a number that's been on the page all along. She was asking me to sign the same thing she signed. She was asking me to become her. And I took my hand out of my bag, and the folder came with it. No, Mom. She blinked and waited for the rest, because in her experience, my sentences to her have always arrived pre-softened, wrapped in 3 apologies. There was no rest. I let it sit there, a complete sentence all on its own. Then I went on, quiet and level, the voice I use in audit meetings when a number will not be argued with. I'm not signing yours. And before you tell me again what I owe, the house was never empty. It was full of me. 7 years of my Saturdays, my floors, my flowers, my mortgage that nobody in this family ever helped carry, and you gave it away over pot roast without asking me a single question. She started to speak. I did not raise my voice. I just did not stop. And the kids were never homeless, Mom. They live with Tessa. They have a home and a mother in it. What Saturday was about, what this table is about, is that something I built got out from under your hands before you could distribute it, and no one in this house can stand it. Caleb, I said, turning, and my brother finally looked at me. I love your children. You know that I do. And you have sat in every room where I was carved up like a casserole, and you have never once said, "Ask her." His ears were scarlet. He said quietly that he never asked for any of this, and here is the sad truth. That was accurate. He never had to ask. That was the whole design of his life. You don't get to invent a fire, I said to the table, to all of them, and then charge me for the water. My mother's chair scraped. But I wasn't finished, and for once, I said so. I'm not finished, Mom. Sit down, please. And heaven help me, she sat, mostly from shock, because the seating chart of the universe had just reorganized itself. I opened my folder and laid 3 pages on the table, square to the wood grain, the same way she'd laid hers. These are education savings accounts, I said. 1 for Ellie, 1 for Sam. I opened them Monday. Funded, in my name, $200 a month into each. Every month, until they're 18. That money goes to the children, not to a landlord, not to a truck payment, not through this table. It cannot be borrowed against, and it cannot be redistributed, because the accounts sit in my name, and I have spent my whole life learning exactly why that matters. I looked at my brother. My door is open to your kids every weekend, Tessa says yes. The lake, the spare room, birthdays, all of it. That's what I give, Caleb. It goes to them, directly, forever. It just doesn't come through her anymore. The kitchen was so quiet I could hear the rooster clock. And then my mother's voice came out in a register I had never heard from her, cracked straight down the middle. No church in it at all. I gave up everything for this family, she said, and her hands were shaking. Everything. And I never once complained. Not one day of my life. And I heard it. I swear to you I heard it. A piano, somewhere under that sentence, closing its lid in 1989. For one long second I saw her at 26, and my heart broke for that girl. Fully and honestly. And if she had stopped there, I think I would have walked around that table and held her. She didn't stop. She looked at my 3 neat pages, the gift with no handle for her to hold it by, and her palms swept out and knocked them off the table. They slid across the linoleum like birds hitting a window. "That's not family," she said. "That's paperwork." And there it was. The whole religion, in a sentence. It only counts as love if it passes through her hands. What happened next happened slowly, the way the biggest things do. My mother stood up to her full height at the head of her table, and she pronounced sentence in the same voice she uses for grace. "Then you are not my daughter," she said. "Not at this table. Not at Christmas. Get out of my house." Caleb made a sound. "Mom." A small protest that stood up, and then sat right back down. The story of his life. My father's hand flattened on the windowsill. "And I want to tell you exactly what I did, because this is the part I'm proudest of. And it isn't dramatic." I bent down, and I picked my 3 pages up off the linoleum, and I did not put them in my bag. I squared them, and I set them back in the center of the table, in the space where her legal pad had been. "The accounts are open either way," I said. "The money moves on the 1st of every month, either way. This isn't a negotiation, Mom. It's just true, whether or not I'm at the table." Nobody in that kitchen had ever seen a gift refuse to be a leash before. Then I looked at my mother and I said the last thing I ever said in that house. Not cruel, not loud, level as a spirit measure. "I was never an empty room, Mom. None of your children were. You just never asked what was inside." And I walked out, past the rooster clock, past the fridge with the school photos, through the door I have walked through since before I could walk. My father followed me onto the back steps. He gripped my shoulder with his mower-smelling hand, and his eyes were wet. And he got out his own whole confession, the longest apology of his life. "1989, he said. "I stood in the yard that day, too. I should have said something. Twice now." I covered his hand with mine for a second. Then the screen door creaked, wanting him back. And as I reached my car, alone on the gravel in the last of the daylight, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Tessa. Word travels through this family faster than truth ever has, so she already knew something had detonated in Kettering, but that isn't what her text said. Her text said, "Whatever just happened over there, the kids have been asking about the lake all week." Saturday? I sat in my car in my parents' driveway, and I cried for about a minute and a half. Not the sad kind, the kind you do when you set down a suitcase full of rocks you'd forgotten you were carrying, and your arms float. Then I typed back the shortest, richest sentence of my summer. Saturday. People ask me now if I regret it, trading my mother's table for a lake house and a folder of paperwork she called cold. Here's my honest answer. What I regret is that I was ever made to choose. If somebody in your life has you picking between your own future and their comfort, hear me, from a driveway in Ohio. That menu only has one honest item on it. Stay with me a few more minutes and subscribe if you haven't, because the ending of this story isn't sad, and I want you to see it. Here's the honest accounting of the months after, because I refuse to end this with a fantasy. My mother kept her word. My chair at Sunday dinner stayed empty through August, September, October. She tells the church I abandon the family, the church brings her casseroles, the system holds. Aunt Carol invoiced me for the moving truck, $180, and I paid it the same day with a memo line that said, "For the truck, not the guilt." She did not cash it for 2 weeks. She cashed it. The group chat went quiet around me, then simply went on without me, the way a river closes over a pulled stone. Some losses are quiet like that. I won't pretend they don't ache on holidays. But the 1st of every month, 2 transfers went out, on schedule, to 2 education accounts, and in September a thank you card arrived in Ellie's careful handwriting, with a horse on it, Organized by Tessa, who organizes what matters. Caleb did something nobody predicted. He found a 2-bedroom apartment off Route 48, close to the kids' actual school, and took a forklift job with weekend shifts off. Arranged by himself? For himself? For the first time since the 90s. Turns out consequences, like water, find their level once nobody's damming them uphill. My father calls me every Thursday from the garage, voice low, mower running for cover. We talk about nothing for 10 minutes, which from Roy Brooks is a sonnet. And me, I run an office now with my name by the door. I drink my coffee on a porch where the loudest argument is between geese. The peony clump took to the soil by my steps like it had been waiting for the transfer paperwork. I planted it in October, which the garden books will tell you is exactly the right time to divide a peony and move it somewhere it can finally spread out. The second Saturday of October, a truck came up my gravel drive, and this time I was expecting it. Ellie and Sam spilled out before Caleb had the brakes set, all cape and sketchbook, and went shrieking down toward the water to boss the geese around. My brother came up the porch steps slowly, holding something, wearing the expression of a man doing unfamiliar math. "These don't open anything," he said, and held out the brass keys, still on their ring, still trailing a limp red ribbon. "Figured you should be the one to throw them away." That was the whole apology. For a Brooks man, it was the Gettysburg Address. I took the ring, dropped the keys in my toolbox by the door, and kept the ribbon. And I could not begin to tell you why, except that some receipts you keep. He stayed for burgers. He was awkward and he was trying. And when Sam fell asleep on my couch mid-cartoon, Caleb carried him to the spare room and stood in the doorway a second, looking at the bed I keep made up there, and said, quiet, mostly to himself, "You didn't have to do any of this." "I know," I said. "That's the point of it." Inside, on my refrigerator, there's a drawing under a magnet. A house with a triangle roof, a row of pink blobs, 2 stick kids, 1 tall stick lady. Sometime that evening, Ellie took it down, made one small edit with a marker, and put it back straight. Aunt Andrea's lake house. The flowers, she informed me, could stay in the picture, since I brought them with me. It's dark now as I tell you this, and the porch light is on, and 2 kids are asleep down the hall in rooms nobody assigned. I used to believe love meant filling every room my family pointed at. Now I know a room is only worth filling when you were asked, and free to